Good evening, good evening, good evening. We are here to do some paper trees. In fact, we want to look at a paper tree in preparation for exam tomorrow. So we want just to give a minute or so before we jump into a paper tree. We will be using the May-June 2023 paper tree. Paper tree did not start a long time ago. The first exam for paper 3-2, which is the alternative paper for SBAs, started in June of 2022. So there are very few past papers that we can use. June 2022, January 2023, June 2023, and January 2024. So there are 4 exams prior, and the 5th one is coming tomorrow. So we are here for that. Yeah. So if everyone is on board, we could get started. You could type 1 in the chat because that's what we are aiming to get. We're aiming to get a 1, 1, a 1. So let's get into the May-June 2023 paper. Let's see how that one would have gone, how it did go. It gives you the instructions at the start of the paper, 1 hour and 15 minutes. This is the alternative paper. So if you are a private candidate, if you didn't have SBA, then you should be doing this paper. It tells you that the paper consists of a case study, and there are 14 related questions from this case study that you must do all of them within this hour and 15 minutes. Yeah. So let's do the case study. Let's jump into the case study. Remember, if you use extra material, you must number it properly. If you want your work to be crossed out or not read by an examiner, then you must cross it out. Yeah. Otherwise, you are writing on the paper and everything. They provide the material. Here are the instructions. The following case study contains information for a research project. Read the case and answer the questions that follow each section. So we have the case study, and they're giving us some background on what has happened. The eruption of Mount Soufriere in St. Vincent caused ashfall on the island and the neighboring islands of Barbados. So this volcano erupted in St. Vincent, but ash fell on Barbados. This prompted the government of Barbados to issue a directive to residents not to leave their homes unless absolutely necessary. The government advised that if residents had to go outside, they should take measures to protect themselves. Harold, a secondary school student who lives in Barbados, learns through social media that his classmates were negatively affected by the ashfall in a number of ways. Being curious, he decided to conduct an online survey using a questionnaire on the effects of volcanic ash on the health of 25 of his classmates. In addition, he did an internet search on the long-term effects of volcanic ash on humans. So that's the case study, and they are giving us questions based on this. And you are encouraged to read it, reread it, take your time, make sure you understand what is happening. And the first question asks you to write a suitable statement of the problem. So basically, they want you to identify what the problem is and write it as a statement. So what's the problem? We see the volcano erupting. That's not the problem. the government advised students to stay inside. That's not the problem. The problem was identified by Harold. Harold is the one who comes up with the whole research and everything, right? So it has a problem that he is targeting. He's in Barbados. His students, or not his students, his classmates were negatively affected. So that's where the problem comes in. His classmates were negatively affected by ashfall in a number of ways. Yeah. So that is the problem. So you need to write it, and you could use your English skills to write it how you see fit. So let me write one. So I wrote, students can be adversely affected by ashfall from a volcano erupting on a neighboring island. Remember, the volcano erupted in St. Vincent, and the students are experiencing the effects from the ashfall in another island, which is Barbados. So this is the problem. Yeah. Any thoughts? They give you a lot of space to write. So you take your time, write. You have to use your English. It must make sense for this specific question. So do go ahead and write it. State the aim of the investigation. So Harold set about to investigate what was going to happen. And an aim should start with to investigate, to determine, to inquire, to find out. You want, it's an aim, it's an objective you want to achieve, right? He wants to conduct, he wants to find out what is happening to his friends or his classmates. Yeah. So how does he, let me highlight it. Look at here, the effects of volcanic ash on the health of 25 of his classmates. All right, so he wants to find this out. That will be his aim. That's what he wants to investigate. So we will write that. To determine the negative effects of volcanic ash on secondary school students. Remember, Harold is in secondary school. You could have written probably teenagers or prepubescent, etc. Secondary school is from about ages 11 to late teens. So yeah, you could have written teenagers, you know, that would have been fine too. All right, or teens, that's fine too. So let's continue. So 4 marks down. So that's quite a bit, 110 to the paper. Remember, this paper has a total of 40 marks. Yeah, 40 marks, which we are getting. So look, they tell us this is the methodology. All right, this is the methodology. So we are starting to go into the meat of the research that Harold is doing. Identify the sample that was used by Harold in conducting his research. What's the sample? Again, we have it there. His sample is the health of 25 of his classmates. So we will just put that, right? So 25 of his classmates is his sample. And you notice how fast this is going, eh? These 1 marks, 2 marks, they add up very quickly. And we are already on question 3. And remember, the instructions told us that there were 14 questions. State 2 other ways in which Harold could have collected data. How did Harold collect data? Well, the survey said he conducted an online survey. Yeah, so it means he would have probably made a form online using some kind of software, and he would have sent it to his friends for them to complete. How else could he have done that? He could have done that plenty of ways, and it just depends on how creative you are in it, especially if you're using online methods, because he could have met them in person. Eh? That's one way he could have done it. But remember, the government was encouraging persons to stay inside unless absolutely necessary. So he could have taken health measurements, he could have done interviews, or whether they were virtual interviews or physical interviews. He could have done a whole multitude of things. So you didn't have to think hard to come up with this answer. So I hope these marks would be acquired easily, right? This paper is a very good example of how tomorrow's exam is going to come. Remember, this replaces the SBA, so it follows a kind of similar format. That's why they have methodology here. Had you been doing an SBA, you would have had a methodology written out in point form, but you're not, right? So they're just asking questions about things that would have been in a methodology had you had to write this as an SBA. Suggest 3 questions Harold may have asked his classmates in the collection of his data. What would you ask about? What would you have asked about if your island was experiencing ash fall? Yeah. And I hope persons are seeing that this is the prevailing activities of the modern day, because there was a volcano that erupted in St. Vincent. We know that these exams, there was a pandemic, so we experienced questions about disease and COVID. Yeah. So you see, it's on the person who created the exams, the questions mind, the modern day activities. Yeah. So questions you would have asked questions around the respiratory system. You would have asked questions around, hey, do you have a safe place to go to? Do you have good ventilation conditions? Is your house open? Is your house incompletely built, etc.? What about water? Because if ash is falling everywhere, your water source may be contaminated. So all of these could be questions. And I want to give you a tip. On this revision session, don't be afraid to read ahead. That's why we tell candidates to read the whole paper. So if you read ahead, you will see the question, you will get some answers or some hints to the questions. Look, they talk about loss of voice, nasal congestion. So he asks about plenty signs and symptoms that the person is experiencing. That's why we could say, yes, he would ask questions about the respiratory system. All right? So do read the whole question or the whole case study and questions before you start. State 2 limitations of Harold's research. His research was, when we go back to the case study or the background for it, was conducted on the internet. He did an internet search on the long-term effects of volcanic ash on humans. What does that mean? If it's long-term effects and the volcano just recently occurred, that means he or his friends, classmates are not experiencing any of the long-term effects as yet, because it has just happened. All right, so that is one limitation. The long-term effects will not be in play as yet. And the internet is not always correct. Things on the internet are not always true. All right. Remember, we have AI that can create things and everything, right? So things on the internet are not always true or correct. So that's 2 simple limitations of Harold's research, which he conducted on the internet. So presentation of data. We're into the next phase of Harold's investigation. And we have a table showing the frequency of symptoms experienced by Harold's classmates. We have them all listed down here, and the frequency is in this column. Using the data in table 1 completes table 2. And we have table 2 here. All right, we have to insert the frequency for each part of the body affected. So we are looking for eyes. Which symptoms correspond to affecting the eyes? That's what we are looking at. When we go up, you could, and in the exam, I would hope persons would do something like cross it out or place a tick when you do it. So here we have eyes and we get 15 because itchy eyes and bloodshot eyes. Those are two things that we would cross out. So you would place a tick or a check mark by right here, right here. So you know you have used that already. Yeah. So nose, and we could do the same thing for nose. You place a mark by things affecting the nose. Nasal congestion is nose. We have runny nose. Those things are affecting the nose, and you add them up, the 5 plus the 9, and you will get your answer. Yeah, so 5 plus 9. Let me just type it out for you. All right. And then we have throat and we have skin. So 2 more left. Yeah. And we could do both of them together. Everyone should get the hang of what is happening now. So skin, we have skin irritation. So we have 9 for skin irritation, and then things affecting the throat, which turns out to be the most. Loss of voice, throat, coughing, sneezing, right? Throat. So let's go through. And this is it. We can add these up. 15 plus 14 plus 38 plus 9 should come up to 76, which when we add these things up, comes up to 76. Remember, no effect will be crossed out because they do not have a part of the body called no effect. All right? So make sure your numbers match. And they continue on with question number 8. On the graph provided on page 7, use a scale of 2 cm to represent 5 units to draw a bar chart showing the information on table 2. Include a suitable title for the graph. So you already know it's a bar graph that you have to draw. I took the liberty of started pre-drawing it for you. And you have to put in a title. So let me put a suitable title, graph showing the frequency of affected body parts, volcanic ash. And let me just make it a little smaller. This will be how your bars will look. They said use a scale of 2 centimeters to represent 5 units. You know that this first column here is the x-axis, and this second column here is the y-axis, because x comes before y on the alphabet. So you did the same thing when you were constructing your graph. You put this stuff on the x-axis, look at here, and then they said 2 centimeters equal every 5 units. So we have 5, 10, 15, and we went up to 40 because the highest number on our table is 38. So we went up to 40. And we plotted in these things correctly. And well, let me just add some annotation to show you when you would have pulled your lines. And you would have pulled your lines. Yeah. The lines would be, you would have pulled your lines and the bar would have been completed. Yeah. So this is how your graph would have looked if you were doing it in the exam. Obviously, you are using a pencil and a ruler when you are constructing your graph. They expect you to have that on you. You are supposed to have that. You are writing in pen, but for the graph drawing, you are using a pencil. So this would be your graph. I hope that is good for everyone. So this would be your graph. All right. So let's, and from your graph, you could obviously see which one is the highest, right? The third one is the highest, the one that went up to 38. That's obvious. The lowest one is skin at 9. And you know, the first one was eyes and then nose. All right. So we should be all good there. So let's just clear these things and continue on. So state one other way in which the data could be presented. You could have presented this data in other ways. That is correct. The simplest version that would come to mind, a pie chart. A pie chart would be a really simple one. Some persons might say histogram. Yeah, I did this in a histogram. You could do bar graph, histogram. Some persons say they're the same thing, but be mindful of which one you did. All right. So pie chart is the answer I'm going with. Let's continue. We're starting to analyze and interpret the data from question number 10. So they ask you, from your graph, identify the part of the body which was most affected by the volcanic ash. That's A. And the part of the body which was least affected by the volcanic ash. I already pointed those out to you, but you know them as the throat and the skin. Yeah, the throat and the skin respectively, and you would complete question 10. All you had to do was go back and look at the graph. Based on the data obtained, list 3 ways in which individuals could have protected themselves while going outdoors. Based on the data, remember things of what was affected: their nose, their eyes, their throat, their skin. So how do you protect those 3 things or those 4 things? How do you protect your eyes? You wear goggles, you wear some kind of protective device over your eyes. You could wear goggles. How do you protect your nose, your mouth, which gives access to your throat? Face masks. We all went through the pandemic, so we should know this. How do you protect your skin? You need to wear long sleeve tops and long pants. You want to be fully covered. You want to be fully covered. All right, that's what you are saying, and you will get the marks, 3 marks easily right there. And then they ask you in question 12, 6 structures of the respiratory system are listed below. Arrange the structures in the order in which the ash would have passed through them when it was inhaled. The first and last structures have been inserted for you, which means there are 4 structures pending. And if we start at the top, we have the nasal passage, what comes after the nasal passage, and we end with the alveoli. Alveoli is another word for ear sac. So, and as a teacher, I like to teach students this pathway. I say nose and mouth to pharynx, etc. and go on. Yeah. Pharynx to larynx, larynx to bronchus, bronchus to bronchiole, bronchiole to ear sac. Yeah. So let me just space them out so it falls nicely. All right. Yeah. So A, B, C, and D completed for question 12. Recommendations and conclusions. So we are wrapping up this report, right? I hope persons are seeing that this is a report that's being completed here. Volcanic ash is abrasive in nature. Discuss how inhaling volcanic ash could affect the functioning of the alveoli. Now remember, the alveoli, think of it as little balloons. Little balloons. And because they're little, they have, and their function requires them to have a high surface area. So if this abrasive, destructive thing called volcanic ash gets in there, it will by default damage the air sacs and decrease the surface area, which is so very important for the diffusion of gases for carbon dioxide and oxygen. So you would be saying all of that. So I would just write it very quickly. The damage ESX, reduce the surface area. But you know, this is because that surface area to volume ratio is what allows the passive movement of gases, oxygen, and carbon dioxide in particular. Part B, the eruption of a volcano is a natural phenomenon in which small amounts of carbon monoxide are emitted. Explain how the inhalation of carbon monoxide could result in death. Carbon monoxide is poisonous to the body because it irreversibly binds to hemoglobin. And you know that your hemoglobin is very important for as the pigment used to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide in your red blood cells. So if it binds irreversibly, meaning it can't unbind, it means your red blood cells not transporting the oxygen. All right? So you will be getting into some trouble. All right? So that's why. So it becomes poisonous. So it is poisonous. And because it's poisonous, it can lead to your death. And the final question for 1 mark, state one conclusion that can be drawn from the research. And there are quite a few conclusions that could be drawn, but the trick is don't think too hard, just go with the first one that pops into your head, right? From all that you have read, and you know, the respiratory system. The respiratory system, remember, they are students. The respiratory system will become problematic, right? So students, the #1 problem they are facing is targeting their respiratory system. So you have respiratory problems faced by the students after Ashford. That is one conclusion that could be drawn from the research. Yeah. So this is an example of a past paper for the paper 3, Human and Social Biology. There are some questions that have multiple answers to them, and think it through. Take your time. An hour and 15 minutes is a lot of time. It's more time than you actually need. It's a lot of time. So I want persons to feel confident, feel that they will do well. It is not hard. Think about it. They barely ask any actual HSB knowledge questions. They ask you to do a graph. Well, everyone could do a graph. They ask you about the skin. They ask you to interpret some data. It does come that easy. So I want you to have the confidence wherever you are doing your exam, whichever country, seeing someone saying they are listening in Cayman Islands, all over the Caribbean is having this exam. You could let us know in the chat where you are or where you will be doing this exam. But I want to encourage you for tomorrow's exam. Be on time as we work to getting those ones. Do leave a comment. Let me know if you got your one, how this paper was for you. And do remember to subscribe. We may think of doing the actual paper that comes tomorrow as well. Put that one in the chat. Otherwise, have a good evening. Good luck in your exam.